Here are some
That is
questions.
wonderful.
Here's some questions for you. All right. What other gimmicks did you ponder before coming up with the king title? This is from Kevin in Quebec.
What other gimmicks did I ponder before coming up with the king gimmick?
Yeah,
Is that what
the king title. Yeah. Did you have any?
I think I've told the story before about how the king gimmick came to be, and back in the day, this started in about 1973 or 74, something like that. That was in an era when everybody didn't have a gimmick. I mean, I was thinking, God, I mean, back in that time, the only gimmicks that I can really remember, and at least that came through the Memphis territory, even when I was a fan back then. Like I remember the Sheik. I guess that would sort of be a gimmick. The gimmicks in those days were based basically. I think maybe the number one gimmick at the time was a mask. If you were a masked wrestler, that was a gimmick. Blonde hair was a gimmick at that time. If you had bleached blonde hair, that was a gimmick. But basically, the guys were just themselves. They were just fabulous Jackie Fargo. He had bleached blonde hair. Don and Al Green, they were just themselves. Or if you were a foreigner, like the Von Brauners, or the German team, or Tojo Yamamoto. That, believe it or not, that was a gimmick back then. So I was kind of one of the first. If you want to call being a king, I guess it definitely would be considered a gimmick. I was one of the first people in the Memphis territory to do something like that, and it all just came about coincidentally, and the fact that some of the fans, I just made that interview one day. I was going against Jackie Fargo, who was the top wrestler in the Memphis territory at the time, and just out of the blue, I don't even know where, I pulled it out of my rear end, just said, Fargo, you've been the king of Memphis wrestling around here for a long time, but you're looking at the kid that's going to knock you off your throne. And I was just saying that as an analogy to the fact that, here was a young up and coming guy that was going to take the place of the older established veteran. And so anyway, I won the match on that Monday night. And as I'm going back to the locker room, some kids are slapping me on the shoulder and saying, "Hey, you're the king now. You're the king." And I swear at the time, I didn't even remember saying that on the Saturday before that. And so I also that very Friday night, I was booked to wrestle down in Atlanta, Georgia. Jerry Jarrett was booking me down in Atlanta for Jim Barnett on some Fridays, and I didn't know any of the talent down there, and I was just kind of walking in, a new face for the Atlanta territory there. And one of the first guys that I met, he comes walking into the locker room, was Bobby Shane. And I never heard of him, never met him before. And under his arm, he has this big crown, and he's got a cape. He's got this royal robe draped over his shoulder, and he was wrestling in Atlanta as King Bobby Shane. And so, boom, a little light bulb went off over my head, and I said, wow, how funny would that be if tomorrow morning in Memphis, or if I showed up in Memphis with a crown and a cape like this, after calling myself the king against Jackie Fargo. And so I asked Bobby, I said, "Man, where'd you get the crown and the robe?" Because I explained to him about the interview, and I told him what I'd like to do. And he told me this place, Southern Importers in Houston, Texas, where I got my crowns for years and years and years after that. But he told me, and this was what worked out so great, was he said, "You know what? I'm actually leaving in the morning. Barnett is sending me down to Australia," which I guess Jim Barnett was just kind of promoting in Australia at the time. And he said, "I'm not wrestling down there as the king." And he said, "I really don't want to carry all this big bulky stuff with me. So if you want to, you take it with you tomorrow to TV up in Memphis, and I'll be back in like a month, and you just bring it back to me, when I get back from Australia." So that's how I showed up the next day on Memphis TV, the week after I said that I was going to knock the Fargo off his throne. Showed up the next day with Bobby Shane's crown and his robe on, and that's how the king gimmick came about. And as everyone knows, like a month later, when Bobby got back from Australia, before I could give him his crown and robe back, he got killed in a plane crash down in Florida. Yeah. And so I was left with that crown and robe, and that's how that gimmick, if you want to call it that, came about. And so it wasn't that I ever thought of any other, I didn't ponder any other kind of gimmick before I did the King stuff, and the King stuff just sort of happened rather than me thinking about it.